From his post near the gates, a royal guard watched it all. At first it looked like harmless fun, but then he saw the way Diddy moved, the way he lingered, the words he whispered, and that's when the guard took a single step forward, breaking protocol in front of hundreds of people. What did he see? And why, even months before the world knew anything, did that one guard know something was wrong? Before we answer that, press the subscribe button and comment below where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. London was showing off that Tuesday morning, the kind of crisp October day where the sun cuts through the city's usual gray haze and makes Buckingham Palace look like something out of a fairy tale. Tourists packed the forecourt 5 deep, everyone jockeying for position behind the ceremonial ropes. Kids pressed their faces against the barriers, staring up in wonder at the soldiers in red tunics and towering bearskin hats. Staff Sergeant Reese Callaway stood at the southeast gate like he'd been carved from stone itself, 43 years old, a Coldstream guardsman with 22 years of service etched into every line of his weathered face. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 3 years counterinsurgency in Northern Ireland, and a Distinguished Conduct Medal that he never talked about. The scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw served as a daily reminder that survival often came down to noticing what others missed. Now he wore the Queen's colors and stood guard over tradition. But make no mistake, Reese Callaway wasn't just for show. His pale blue eyes swept the crowd constantly. The nervous teenager clutching a backpack too tightly, the middle-aged man who'd been filming the same spot for 10 minutes, the woman arguing with her husband in hushed whispers. 22 years of training had taught him that danger doesn't always announce itself with sirens and gunfire. Sometimes it walks up wearing a designer suit and a $1 million smile. That morning, danger arrived in a convoy of glossy black Range Rovers. The crowd's energy shifted like electricity before a thunderstorm. Phones came out faster than you could blink, held high above heads and thrust through gaps in the barrier. Voices rose from murmurs to excited chatter to outright screams. Someone near the front started jumping up and down, their tourist guidebook forgotten on the ground. "Oh my God, that's Diddy! That's actually Sean Combs!" The rear door of the lead vehicle swung open, and out stepped the man himself. Sean Diddy Combs, music mogul, fashion icon, walking empire, custom Armani suit, Patek Philippe watch catching the sunlight, and that practiced smile he'd perfected over decades in the spotlight. The crowd absolutely lost their minds. Teenage girls screamed like they were witnessing a resurrection. Grown adults pushed and shoved against the barriers. Children who probably couldn't name a single one of his songs started shouting, "Diddy, Diddy," just because everyone else was. Cameras flashed like paparazzi lightning as dozens of voices called out in a dozen different languages. "Over here, please. Just one picture, Mr. Combs. Sean, look this way." From his post, 20 yards away, Reese watched a palace protocol officer exchange quiet words with one of Diddy's security team. Apparently, this visit was legitimate. Pre-approved walkabout privileges outside the main gates, all above board. He worked the crowd like a politician on election day. He didn't just allow selfies, he orchestrated them, leaned in close, cracked jokes, signed whatever people thrust at him. He ruffled the hair of a young boy wearing a Lakers jersey, posed with a family from Ohio. He even made the grandmother blush when he kissed her hand. Then he winked at a group of teenage girls pressed against the far barrier, and they looked ready to faint on the spot. To everyone watching, he was magnetic, charming, a global superstar, graciously giving his time to ordinary people who would remember this moment for the rest of their lives. But Reese Callaway had learned to look deeper than surface charm. In Kandahar, the most dangerous men were often the ones who smiled first. The first thing that caught his attention was small. Diddy was crouched down for a group photo with two girls, maybe 11 or 12 years old. But Reese noticed how Diddy's right hand rested just a little too low across one girl's back, how it lingered there a beat longer than necessary, how the girl's smile flickered and she shifted her weight uncomfortably. Could have been nothing, but Reese kept watching. Then came the second moment. A young boy offered Diddy a toy soldier from the gift shop. Diddy laughed, took it, tousled the kid's hair. Normal enough, but then he leaned down and whispered something in the boy's ear. Something that made the kid blink in surprise, then nod slowly with this awkward grin. The boy's parents were right there, maybe 3 feet away, beaming with pride and snapping photos of their son with a celebrity, completely oblivious to whatever had just been whispered. Why would they be concerned? It was just a famous person being kind to their child. Again, nothing you could put your finger on, nothing that would hold up in any formal complaint. But instinct doesn't work on evidence, it works on patterns. And Reese was starting to see a pattern. He felt that familiar tightness in his chest. The same feeling he'd gotten walking patrol in Kabul when the local children started avoiding certain streets. Not fear, exactly, more like recognition, his subconscious picking up on signals his rational mind hadn't quite processed yet. The feeling that said, something here is wrong. A teenage girl asked for a selfie. Diddy pulled her in for a side hug, angled the phone for the best shot. But when she stepped away, Reese caught something else. The way Diddy's eyes followed her. Not polite interest, something hungrier. Then their eyes met across the forecourt. Not accidental eye contact. Not the kind of brief acknowledgement you make when you catch someone looking. This was deliberate, a moment of assessment between two men who understood what the other was doing. Diddy looked directly at Reese, and his public smile never wavered. But underneath it, something else flickered. Something colder, more private. A micro-expression that lasted maybe half a second, but said everything. A smirk that communicated, I see you watching me and I don't care. Reese stared back without blinking, his face stone still but his mind racing. In that brief exchange, Sean Combs had just revealed himself, not as the charming celebrity working the crowd, but as something else entirely. Something that recognized a threat and dismissed it as irrelevant. The moment stretched between them like a wire under tension. Then Diddy turned away, throwing his arm around another fan like nothing had happened. But Reese Callaway had spent 2 decades reading about dangerous men in dangerous places, and Sean Combs had just told him everything he needed to know without saying a word. The crowd was still buzzing, still pressing forward, still lost in the excitement of meeting their idol. Palace staff hovered nearby, the protocol officer checking his watch, a security guard speaking quietly into his radio, a photographer capturing the moment for the official record. None of them seemed concerned. Why would they be? This was just a celebrity being generous with his time, going above and beyond for his fans, the kind of positive publicity the palace occasionally courted. That's what made it so dangerous. Evil rarely announces itself. It hides behind smiles and charm and the assumption that famous people are automatically trustworthy. Reese shifted his stance just slightly, weight rolling from one boot to the other. To the tourists, he looked exactly the same as he had for the past hour, motionless, ceremonial, part of the palace furniture. But now he was alert in a different way, not just ceremonially vigilant, operationally aware, because he could feel it building, that electric tension that comes right before everything goes sideways. He just didn't know how bad it was about to get. That's when little Miri appeared at the edge of the crowd. She couldn't have been older than 9. Wispy brown hair in 2 neat braids tied with pink ribbons, wearing a denim jacket covered in patches from bands she probably didn't even listen to yet. She clutched a spiral notebook against her chest, her eyes wide with wonder. Her parents had stepped away just moments before, drawn into conversation with a palace staffer near the gift shop. They were maybe 20 feet away, close enough to keep an eye on her, but far enough that they couldn't hear individual conversations over the crowd noise. Diddy spotted Miri immediately, the way predators always spot the isolated prey. "Well, look who we have here," he said, that practiced smile spreading across his face as he knelt down to her eye level. His voice took on that special tone adults use with children, slightly higher, more musical. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Miri's face lit up like fireworks on New Year's Eve. "I'm Miri. I drew you a picture." She held out her notebook with both hands, practically vibrating with excitement. Diddy took the notebook with theatrical reverence, flipping through pages covered in crayon drawings. "You made all this for me? This is incredible artwork." She nodded so hard, her braids bounced against her shoulders. "Best drawings I've seen all day," he said, pulling her in for a quick hug. "You're going to be famous someday." Cameras clicked all around them. Someone's grandmother probably squealed with delight in the background. A perfect moment of celebrity kindness that would be remembered and retold for years. From his post, Reese watched the interaction unfold with the focused attention of a sniper. The hug was brief, appropriate, nothing that would raise eyebrows or concern parents. But then, Diddy didn't fully let go. He kept one hand resting on her small shoulder while crouching beside her, leaning in to whisper something that made her giggle and cover her mouth with her free hand. They posed for a selfie together, Diddy angling his phone to get them both in frame, making sure the lighting was good. "Say superstar," he told her. "Super," she chirped, her missing front tooth making her lisp slightly. Her parents were still distracted, still chatting with the palace staffer about something involving a map and printed schedules. Nobody nearby thought anything was odd. Just a sweet moment between a global icon and his youngest fan, the kind of interaction that restored faith in celebrities and gave kids stories to tell at school. But Reese was watching for different things, not smiles or photo opportunities. He was watching body language, micro-expressions, the spaces between words, the things that happen in the gaps when people think nobody's paying attention. And that's when he saw it happen. Miri took a small step backward, not retreating exactly, but the way kids do when something feels different and they're not sure what's changed. Maybe she was getting shy, or maybe some instinct was telling her to create distance. Diddy gently placed his hand against her back and guided her closer again. Nothing rough, nothing that would alarm anyone watching. Just enough pressure to keep her where he wanted her, positioned between his body and the crowd, so their conversation couldn't be overheard. "You like music a lot?" he asked her, his voice dropping to a more intimate register. She nodded eagerly. "I have all your songs on my iPad. My dad lets me play them in the car on long trips." "Your dad's got excellent taste," Diddy said with a chuckle. "Bet you're the coolest kid in your whole school." She giggled. My teacher sometimes lets me play my playlist during art time. The other kids think I know all the best songs. Diddy's smile widened, but his voice dropped even lower. You know what would be really cool? What if I came to pick you up from school one day? Can you imagine your friends' faces when they see you getting out of my car? Miri blinked, processing this suggestion. Not scared, not alarmed, but not quite sure how to respond either. Picture it, he continued. His voice now pitched just for her ears, while his free hand gestured as if painting a scene. Your whole neighborhood watching you hop out of a limo with me, your classmates going absolutely crazy. You'd be the most famous kid in your town. She giggled nervously, her eyes darting toward the crowd as if looking for her parents. That would be pretty cool, she said uncertainly. It could happen, he told her with a conspiratorial wink. Famous people do stuff like that all the time. Surprise visits, special trips. All you'd have to do is keep it secret until it happens. That's when every alarm bell in Reese, Callaway's head started screaming at maximum volume. He'd heard this exact conversation before, different words, different context, but the same psychological pattern. The way human traffickers built trust and compliance in children. Start with compliments to make them feel special. Plant fantasies about exciting adventures and celebrity treatment. Introduce the concept of secrets, shared knowledge that creates intimacy and separates the child from their support system. Diddy wasn't touching her inappropriately, wasn't saying anything explicitly threatening or sexual. To anyone listening casually, it would sound like harmless celebrity banter. Just a famous person being kind to a young fan, maybe getting a little carried away with his generosity. But Reese had been in briefing rooms with FBI agents who specialized in child exploitation, had read the case files, had seen the transcripts of how predators groom their victims, building trust through attention and gifts. Creating scenarios where children feel chosen and special, gradually normalizing the idea of secret meetings and private time. This wasn't fame anymore. This was a textbook grooming approach disguised as charm and filtered through celebrity worship. Diddy guided Miri a few steps toward the velvet rope barrier, positioning himself between her and the nearest palace staffer. His posture remained casual, friendly, but the movement was deliberate, creating a bubble of privacy in the middle of a crowd. "Want to know a secret?" he asked her, voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, still clutching her notebook, but holding it a little tighter now. "I always remember my real fans," he said with that practiced wink that had charmed millions. "The special ones like you. You ever need anything at all, you just find a way to reach out to me, okay? I take care of the people who matter." Another nervous giggle, smaller this time, more uncertain. Some part of her 9-year-old brain was starting to register that this conversation felt different from what she'd expected. Reese watched as Diddy took one more small step toward the rope line, Miri following. Not because she wanted to, but because she didn't know she had a choice. Adults were supposed to be trusted. Famous adults were supposed to be even more trustworthy. One more step would put them outside the ceremonial boundary, past the velvet rope that marked the difference between public space under palace security and somewhere else entirely, somewhere less watched, less protected. That's when Staff Sergeant Reese Callaway made the decision that would define the rest of his career. He moved Not dramatically, not with the kind of sudden motion that would cause panic or make headlines, but he stepped down from his ceremonial post and walked across the forecourt with the measured pace of a man who had made up his mind, his boots clicking against the ancient cobblestones in a rhythm that somehow cut through all the crowd noise. Gasps rippled through the tourists like wind through wheat. Phones swung toward him, fingers frantically tapping record buttons. Someone whispered, "The guard moved," like they'd witnessed a miracle or a catastrophe. But Reese wasn't thinking about protocol or tradition or the dozen regulations he was about to shatter. He wasn't worried about his career or the disciplinary hearing that would inevitably follow. He was thinking about a 9-year-old girl who was 30 seconds away from disappearing into a situation she wouldn't understand until it was far too late. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice carrying that tone of absolute, unquestionable authority that comes from 2 decades of commanding respect in places where hesitation gets people killed. "The child stays on this side of the rope." Diddy stopped mid-step. He looked back slowly, that celebrity smile already forming on his lips. Camera-ready even in the moment of being challenged. But there was something else in his eyes now. A flicker of calculation, annoyance quickly suppressed. "Easy there, soldier," he chuckled, raising both hands in mock surrender while never losing that practiced charm. "We're just talking here. Little girl's a big fan, and I'm trying to give her a moment she'll remember." Miri looked up at Reese with confusion written all over her small face. "He was being really nice," she said quietly, her voice carrying that defensive tone children use when they think an adult is being unfair. "He's my favorite singer in the whole world." Reese's voice softened when he addressed her, but his eyes never left Diddy's face. "I'm sure he was being nice, sweetheart, but you need to stay where your mom and dad can see you." "Come on, man," Diddy said with that practiced laugh that had charmed talk show hosts and award show audiences for decades. "Don't make this into something weird. I'm just giving her a moment she'll remember forever. What's the harm in that?" "She'll remember it," Reese replied evenly, his tone carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Let's make sure it's something good she remembers." Palace staff had started to notice the commotion, uncertain whether to intervene. The protocol officer was walking over with quick, nervous steps, clearly trying to figure out how to handle a situation that wasn't covered in any manual. Tourists were filming everything now, some confused by the interruption, others sensing drama and leaning in for better angles. But Diddy kept it light, brushing off the interruption like it was a simple misunderstanding that would be laughable later. "No harm, no foul here," he said, giving Miri a final wink. "Right, superstar? You keep drawing those amazing pictures." She nodded hesitantly, still holding her notebook, the excitement on her face now mixed with embarrassment and confusion. The magic of the moment had been broken, and she didn't understand why. That's when her parents returned, hurrying over with arms full of Palace gift shop bags and faces flushed with excitement. "Oh my goodness, is that really Sean Combs?" Her mother gasped, nearly dropping her purchases. "Mary, you actually got to meet him." "We got some great pictures," Diddy said smoothly, that megawatt smile back in full force as he handed Miri her notebook. "She's incredibly talented. Drew me some amazing artwork." Miri's father glanced between Reese and Diddy, picking up on the subtle tension in the air, but not understanding its source. "She's been excited about this trip for months. I hope she wasn't bothering you or asking for too much attention." "Not at all," Diddy replied, with practiced grace. "Just had a lovely chat about music and art. She's got a bright future ahead of her." He turned to Miri one last time, crouching down to her level. "You keep drawing and listening to good music, okay? And remember what I said about how special fans get special treatment." She nodded silently, clutching her notebook against her chest. Diddy straightened up, waved a casual goodbye to the gathered crowd, and walked toward his waiting convoy with that confident stride that had carried him across countless red carpets. His security team fell in step around him, creating a moving barrier of dark suits and earpieces. But just before sliding into the back seat of his Range Rover, he glanced back across the forecourt. One final time. His eyes found Reese and held for a moment that stretched longer than politeness required. That same cold calculation flickered across his features. Not anger, not embarrassment, just acknowledgement, like he was filing away the face of the man who had interrupted his game, making a mental note for future reference. Then the door closed with the soft thunk of expensive engineering, and the convoy pulled away into London traffic, leaving only the lingering scent of leather and cologne. Reese walked back to his post with the same measured pace, resumed his position, and stood motionless once again. To the tourists, it looked like a brief moment of drama was over. Some were already reviewing the videos they'd captured on their phones. Others had moved on to taking more pictures of the guards and the palace facade. But Miri stayed where she was for a moment longer, looking up at the tall soldier who had stepped forward when no one else seemed to think anything was wrong. "Why did you do that?" she asked quietly, her voice barely carrying over the crowd noise. Reese couldn't answer while on ceremonial duty, couldn't break protocol any further than he already had without facing serious consequences. But he looked down at her with eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness to ignore warning signs, no matter how subtle. She seemed to understand something in that look, even if she couldn't put it into words. She clutched her notebook closer to her chest and walked back to her parents, who were already discussing their next stop on the London tourist trail. The rest of Reese's shift passed without incident. The autumn sun tracked across the sky, casting long shadows across the forecourt. Tourists came and went in waves, taking their pictures and buying their souvenirs and moving on to the next attraction. The ceremonial routines continued as they had for centuries, unbroken and unchanging. But something had shifted in the space between what everyone saw and what actually happened. Most people would remember that day as the time they witnessed a celebrity appearance at Buckingham Palace. Miri would remember it as the day she met her favorite singer, but Reese Callaway would remember it as the day he stepped forward before something terrible could unfold in plain sight, hidden behind fame and charm, and the assumption that evil announces itself with obvious signs. By evening, when his shift ended and the palace gates closed to the public, Reese found himself summoned to his commanding officer's quarters. The room was all polished brass and military precision, with a single manila folder sitting on the mahogany desk. Colonel Henderson was a career soldier in his 50s, with the bearing that came from decades of difficult decisions. "Callaway," he began, without looking up immediately from the papers spread before him, "you broke protocol today." "Yes, sir." "Stepped out of position during ceremonial duty. Spoke while representing the Crown in public capacity. Interrupted a sanctioned diplomatic engagement without authorization from command structure." "Yes, sir." The colonel finally raised his eyes, studying Reese's face with the attention of a man trying to read between lines that weren't written in any regulation manual. You understand why we have these protocols? We don't make unilateral judgment calls based on personal instincts when we're representing centuries of tradition in front of international audiences. Understood, sir? There was a long pause. Not the kind that comes before punishment, but the kind that comes before understanding. The colonel leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, weighing words that would never appear in any official report. That said, he continued, his voice taking on a different quality, instinct isn't something we train out of good soldiers. It's something we hope they'll know when to trust, even when everything else tells them to stay silent. He closed the folder without opening it, the gesture carrying more weight than any written reprimand. I'm not putting this in your permanent record, but don't make a habit of creative interpretation. Yes, sir. Dismissed without formal discipline. No write-up, no career-ending notation, just the weight of a decision that had crossed every line in the book, maybe for exactly the right reasons. That night, Reese sat in his small quarters, polishing his ceremonial boots, more from habit than necessity. His hands moved in the familiar circular motions, working the leather to a mirror shine. But his mind was elsewhere, back at the gates, replaying every second. The too long hug, the whispered promises about surprise visits, the casual suggestion about keeping secrets. He asked himself the question that had been gnawing at him since the moment Diddy's convoy disappeared. What if I was wrong? Maybe he'd embarrassed an innocent child in front of her hero, undermined a beloved celebrity who was genuinely trying to be kind to young fans, turned a magical moment that Miri would have treasured forever into something awkward and confusing. Maybe Sean Combs really was just being generous with his time, and Reese had let his paranoia and military suspicion corrupt something beautiful. The doubt sat heavy in his chest as days passed, then weeks, then months. The incident faded from palace memory the way most small disruptions do. Diddy's visit wasn't mentioned in any official reports or briefings. The tourists moved on to other attractions and other excitement. Miri probably went back to school and told her friends about meeting her favorite singer, carefully editing out the strange moment when the guard interrupted their conversation. Life continued with the steady rhythm of duty and routine until the morning everything changed. The news broke on a Tuesday in March, 6 months after that autumn day at the palace. Reese was in the mess hall drinking his first coffee of the day and scanning the morning briefings on his tablet when the headline made his blood run cold. Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs facing federal trafficking and racketeering charges. More stories followed in rapid succession. Lawsuits from dozens of victims, federal investigations spanning multiple states, allegations of manipulation, coercion, and systematic exploitation stretching back decades. One article mentioned documented grooming behaviors exhibited toward minors during public appearances and fan interactions. Another referenced hours of video evidence from fan encounters, smiles and hugs and whispered promises that had seemed innocent to everyone watching, but formed a clear pattern when examined by investigators. Reese read every word while his coffee grew cold in the cup, sitting alone in the quiet mess hall as rain drummed against the windows outside. There was no vindication in the headlines. No mention of a royal guard who'd recognized the warning signs months before federal investigators made their arrests. No praise for trusting instinct over protocol when everything else said to stay silent. And that was exactly how he wanted it. He closed the browser tab, folded his hands on the scratched mess hall table, and exhaled slowly through his nose. Not relief, exactly. Just the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing you did the right thing when it mattered most. Somewhere in London, a little girl named Miri was getting ready for school, probably listening to different music now, living the normal life that children deserve. She might not even remember the strange day when a guard interrupted her meeting with a celebrity. But if she did remember, she'd remember going home safe with her parents instead of disappearing into something too horrible to imagine. And in the end, that was worth more than any commendation or recognition could ever be.